In the rain where the cold winds cry, an 11-year-old walks asking why. A slammed door echoes sharp and deep while the town stays silent, pretending to sleep. One small bag, one trembling hand, one loyal dog who understands. No roof of warmth, no guiding flame, just darkened roads and whispered pain. Through the forest, soaked and alone, toward a cabin the world had disowned. Broken walls, a fragile door, yet hope lived there upon the floor. A growl, a scratch, a hidden seam, a secret buried in dust and dream. Old lost stories, stolen years, wrapped in silence, weight, and tears. Gold could feed him, warm his night, but truth still called his heart to light. A child chose honor over gain, and changed his fate through loss and rain. So listen close, the storm, the boy, the choice he made, for in the darkest night, true heroes are quietly made. The rain started just after sunset, light at first, then pouring hard enough to seep through the broken pavement and into everything it touched. 11-year-old Ethan Miller stood on the front porch of the only home he had ever known, gripping a faded backpack in one hand and the worn leash of his dog in the other. Buddy, a scruffy brown mutt with weary eyes and an unshakably loyal heart, pressed tightly against Ethan's leg, sensing trouble the way animals always could. Behind them, the front door slammed. "Don't come back," Karen snapped from inside, her voice cold and final. "I'm done raising someone else's child." Ethan said nothing. He had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Karen had never truly cared for him, not since the day his father died and left her with unpaid bills and a boy who reminded her of everything she wanted to forget. To her, Ethan wasn't a hurting child. He was a weight, a mistake, a responsibility she never wanted. His clothes and school books lay scattered across the porch, thrown out like garbage. One sneaker struck the railing and dropped into a puddle below. Karen didn't even glance back. She shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and walked away. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tight with shock and shame. He wasn't angry yet, just empty. Buddy gave a soft whimper, licking Ethan's rain-soaked hand. The dog had been with him since he was 7, ever since Ethan rescued him from a ditch behind the grocery store. They had survived everything together: empty plates, silent nights, whispered promises that someday things would change. Buddy was more than a pet, he was family. "We'll be okay," Ethan murmured, though he wasn't certain it was true. The neighborhood stayed silent. Curtains shifted. A few porch lights glowed, but no one stepped outside. No one asked if a boy and his dog needed help in the rain. Ethan slung his backpack over his shoulder and gathered what little he could carry. His hands trembled, but his voice stayed calm as he spoke to Buddy. "We can't stay here." Together, they walked away from the house, down the street toward the edge of town. Each step felt heavier than the last. Ethan didn't know where they were headed, only that they couldn't return. The rain kept falling as the small boy and his faithful dog disappeared into the darkness, carrying nothing but each other and a fragile belief that somewhere ahead, a better life might exist. The rain didn't ease when Ethan left town. If anything, it grew colder, heavier, as though the sky itself wanted to erase him and Buddy completely. By the time they reached the dirt path leading into the woods, Ethan's sneakers were soaked through and his fingers had gone numb. Still, he pressed on. Stopping felt worse than the ache. Buddy stayed close, his alert, protective eyes scanning the dark trees lining the road. Every so often, he glanced back at Ethan as if to say, "I'm still here, you're not alone." The forest was quieter than the town, but not peaceful. Branches groaned in the wind and something stirred deep in the underbrush. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, wishing his father were there to tell him everything would be all right. But that comforting voice was gone, replaced by Karen's harsh words echoing in his mind. Just when Ethan thought he couldn't take another step, Buddy stopped. The dog tugged gently at the leash, ears raised, nose twitching. Through the rain and fog, Ethan saw it, a dark outline hidden among tall, leaning pine trees. As they moved closer, the shape became clear. A cabin, old, forgotten. Like something the world had quietly abandoned. The roof sagged in the center, one window boarded shut with crooked planks. Vines crept along the walls and the porch steps were cracked, but the structure still stood, barely, yet standing. A faint spark of hope stirred inside Ethan. "I guess this is it," he whispered. People in town used to speak of this place in hushed voices. Ethan remembered hearing adults call it unlucky, eerie, even cursed. Someone had died here once, they said, and after that no one wanted it. But to a boy with nowhere else to go, it didn't seem haunted. It looked like shelter. He pushed the door carefully. It groaned long and loud but held together. Inside, the air was dusty and cold, yet dry, already better than the rain outside. Water dripped from Ethan's hair onto the wooden floor as Buddy explored every corner, his tail giving a small, hopeful wag. "Hey, it's not so bad," Ethan said, trying to sound brave instead of frightened. There was a small fireplace, a crooked table, and an old couch with torn cushions. It wasn't home, not yet, but it could be something close. Ethan set down his backpack and brushed dirt from the couch so Buddy could curl up. The dog shook off the rain, settled in, and released a long, tired sigh. For the first time since Karen slammed that door, Ethan felt a tiny piece of his chest loosen. He wasn't safe yet, he wasn't warm or fed or protected, but he wasn't standing in the rain anymore. Either outside, thunder rolled inside. A boy and his dog sat together in a forgotten cabin, holding on to each other in the fragile hope that this place, no matter how broken, might give them a chance to survive. Morning light slipped through the broken window, thin and pale, but it was enough to wake Ethan for a moment. He forgot where he was then. He saw the cracked ceiling, the dust floating in the air, and Buddy curled up beside him on the couch. Reality came back fast, but it didn't feel as terrifying as the night before. At least they were dry. Ethan sat up, rubbing his eyes. His stomach growled loud and impatient, but he ignored it. First, he needed to make this place safer. The cabin wasn't falling apart yet, but it was definitely fragile, like it had one bad storm left in it. Buddy stood and stretched, then suddenly froze. The dog's ears went up, his body went stiff. Then he let out a low, warning growl. "What is it, boy?" Ethan whispered. Buddy walked slowly toward the back of the cabin, stopping near the stairs that led down to the basement. He sniffed the air, then barked once, sharp and urgent. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The basement smelled damp and old, like wet wood and forgotten things. He flicked on a flashlight he'd found in a drawer, its weak beam cutting through the darkness. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The steps creaked under his weight, but they held at the bottom. Buddy went straight to one wall. He started scratching at it. "Buddy, stop," Ethan said, nervous. "You're gonna knock something down." But the dog didn't listen. He kept digging at the wall, his paws thumping against the concrete. Something about the sound felt wrong, hollow. Ethan tapped the wall with his knuckles. Thud. Not solid, not like the rest. His heart began to race, not with excitement, but with cautious curiosity. Using a rusty tool he found nearby, Ethan carefully chipped away at the surface. Dust filled the air. The more he scraped, the more obvious it became. This part of the wall had been sealed up on purpose. Someone had hidden something here. With one final push, a narrow panel came loose. Behind it was a small hidden door. Ethan stared at it, his breath caught in his chest. The wood was old, but carefully maintained, like whoever built it didn't want anyone to find what was behind it. Buddy wagged his tail, barking softly, as if proud of what he discovered. Ethan slowly opened the door. Inside was a small room, dry and strangely clean compared to the rest of the basement. Stacked neatly along the walls were metal boxes, wrapped canvases, and bundles of yellowed papers tied with twine. Names, dates, and foreign cities were written on the labels. One of them read 1944 Vienna, another private collection. Ethan didn't know much about art or history, but even he could tell this wasn't junk. This was something valuable, something important. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. Money, food, a warm place to live, a life where no one could throw him out again. Buddy looked up at him with his trusting, gentle eyes. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know yet what he was going to do, but he knew one thing for sure: this cabin wasn't empty, and nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the metal boxes, the wrapped paintings, and those strange handwritten labels. They felt heavy in his mind, like a secret too big for a kid his age to carry. Alone, Buddy stayed curled up beside him, warm and steady, his slow breathing the only thing that kept Ethan from spiraling into fear. By morning, the decision was still there, sitting in his chest like a restless weight. He could take one thing, just one. No one would know. With even a small piece of what he'd found, Ethan could buy food, warm clothes, maybe even a tiny apartment he wouldn't have to sleep in. A broken cabin ever again, but then he remembered his dad being poor doesn't make you weak. His father used to say being dishonest does. Ethan opened one of the boxes and pulled out a small framed painting. Even to his untrained eyes, it looked old and precious. His hand shook as he wrapped it in his jacket. I'm just going to show it to someone, he whispered to Buddy. That's all. The walk back into town felt longer than the night before. People stared at him as he passed a dirty, tired kid with a dog and something wrapped under his arm. No one smiled, no one asked if he was okay. At the police station, the front desk officer looked confused when Ethan explained where the painting came from. You found this in a cabin, she repeated. Yes, ma'am, Ethan said, his voice nervous but firm. There's a whole room full of stuff like this. I think it belongs to someone. That was all it took. Within hours, police cars and unmarked vehicles were driving toward the cabin. Men and women in gloves and suits went in and out, taking pictures, making phone calls, speaking in quiet, serious voices. They treated Ethan like he mattered, like what he'd done was important. And then the news spread. Someone from town recognized the cabin. Someone else saw the police before Ethan knew it. Karen was standing in front of him, eyes wide and suddenly soft. Oh, Ethan, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I was so worried about you. You shouldn't have run off like that. Run off as if she hadn't thrown him out into the rain. You can come home now, Karen added quickly. We're family. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he didn't feel small. You didn't want me when I had nothing, he said quietly. You only want me now. Karen's smile twitched. Buddy growled low in his throat, standing protectively at Ethan's side. Ethan turned away. Doing the right thing hadn't made life easier, but it had shown him who he really was, and that was worth more than any treasure. Weeks passed after the discovery in the cabin, but Ethan's life no longer felt frozen in that rainy night when he was thrown out. The truth about the hidden room came out little by little. The paintings and documents had once belonged to families who were forced to flee during the war, and experts confirmed that everything Ethan found was worth millions. But more important than the money was the story behind it, a story of loss, injustice, and things taken from people who never got them back. Because Ethan did the honest, courageous thing and told the authorities, the government awarded him a legal finder's fee. It was more money than he had ever imagined. Yet when the check arrived, Ethan didn't feel greedy or wild with excitement. He felt quiet, thoughtful, like this moment was about more than just numbers on a piece of paper. Karen tried to call him again. She left messages full of sudden apologies and dramatic promises, but Ethan didn't call back. Some doors once closed didn't deserve to be reopened. Instead, Ethan and Buddy moved into a small, warm home with a kind foster family who treated him like he mattered. They asked about his day. They cooked dinner together. They laughed. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt safe. He didn't forget the cabin, though. With help from social workers and volunteers, he turned it into a simple shelter for kids who had nowhere else to go. Kids just like him. No big signs, no fancy headlines, just quiet place where nobody would ever be thrown out into the cold. Buddy ran freely through the trees, his loyal tail wagging as if he knew they had both found what they were always searching for. So here's a question for you. If you were in Ethan's place, poor, alone, and suddenly facing a life-changing secret, would you have chosen money or doing what's right? Ethan chose integrity, and in the end that choice gave him something even better than a fortune. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about courage, kindness, and the quiet strength of doing the right thing when no one is watching.